What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Emily Kramer, co-founder at Market One. Emily started her career in media planning at ad agencies in San Francisco and also had a stint growing a programmatic ad platform. She went back to school and completed her MBA at Harvard and joined Salesforce as a product marketing MBA intern before later joining a startup called Ticketfly as an early marketing team member. Emily then made the mega move to Asana as head of marketing as the 35th employee, where she built and scaled the marketing team from only 1 to 25 in less than 4 years. She moved on to an email startup called Astrotech as VP of marketing, where she led the company to a Series A funding and won the esteemed Product Hunt Golden Kitty Award, no big deal, for Mobile App of the Year in 2017. The startup looked a lot like AI productivity apps popping up today, just a few years too early. Emily then joined Carta as VP of marketing, where she grew the team from 2 to 30 and sat on the exec team and reported directly to the CEO. While there, she co-authored a gender gap and equity study, which was featured in over 50 publications. Emily then kickstarted her entrepreneurial path and started dabbling in angel investing. She took first round's angel track, which helped turn her investing hobby into a new career, where she's now invested in over 50 companies as angel investor. She joined Empower Work as a board member, an NPO providing tech support for vulnerable workers facing challenging work situations. And in October 2020, Emily made the plunge and launched Market One with her co-founder, Kathleen, initially as an advisory business, then as a newsletter and community aimed at helping founders and marketers scale their teams, and later as a capital fund, also helping early stage B2B startups. Emily, what a wild and awesome journey. So honored to have you on the show. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And no problem. It's weird to hear your life like read out like that. I'm like, did I do that? Did that happen? Guess it did. But you took it all the way back, you know? I don't really, people don't often ask me about my ad agency days. But, you know, it's a good way to start in tech. Get a lot of experience with or good way to start in marketing, rather. You get a lot of experience with a lot of different brands, which is always fun. But yeah, excited to chat.
I read that it was like a programmatic ad platform, and one of the early clients was like Microsoft, right? Because it was a product that...
Yeah, this was a long time ago. I'm getting up there. So this was like early days of, programmatic or like data-driven ad buying, essentially. And at the agency I was at, which is called Universal McCann, our main client was Microsoft. And within the agency, we started like our own ad platform because we were like kicking out budgets to big ad platforms. They were all kind of the same. And so we like built our own in-house essentially. And so I got to work on that. So it was kind of like a intrapreneurship situation, which is a hard word to say. And so we were starting this new thing inside the agency and took the clients that we had on the agency side and used that to kickstart. So kind of like a really fast path to getting customers when you're building something within an agency. And it still exists today. So that's cool. So that platform is called Cadreon, which is, I didn't name it. I did name Market One and I named it poorly, so I guess I shouldn't make fun of the name Cadreon. Nobody knows if it's MKT1 or Market One, not even myself, as I always say. So anyway, yeah, that's my early journey. And then I went to business school and then started this whole startup marketing path and was accidentally the first marketer 4 times. And here we are.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because
for sure.
You've got some like pretty crazy startups that you joined very early and like a history of doing this early, like Asana, Carta, Astro. Like,
you got it.
What do you attribute to your ability to spot these up and coming companies, and what advice do you have for marketers in picking potential unicorns, being a solo marketer or like a one person or a small team of marketers at these types of companies? Like, what do you ask people in interviews? What do you do for spotting these?
That's like 17 questions in one, but I'll do my best. So look, like, I'm going to caveat by saying that there's a lot of luck and great timing involved. And so anybody that tells you otherwise as an investor or as someone who's worked at a number of great startups is lying. Like, there's a ton of luck and timing involved. So like, I conveniently went to business school like right after the 2008 kind of downturn, which like that was a great time to hang out at business school. Like that wasn't my plan. It's just the way it worked out, but it worked out well. And by the time I came back and started working at startups in 2011, things were back on the upswing. And I stopped working at startups right before COVID and started like my own thing, which I missed a lot of the marketing mess and turnover that's been going on over the last few years, or downsizing. So there's a lot of, again, luck and timing. But I think for me, it's like the same things that I use to pick companies and select where I wanted to give tons of my time is actually like we've evolved it a little bit, but a similar framework. I didn't know it was a framework at the time, but a similar framework to how me and my partner Kathleen invest in companies now, which is that we think there needs to be a great product. There needs to be a product that if you were in the target audience, you would want to use it and recommend it. It doesn't need to be something you use yourself, but it needs to be something you would recommend. You need to be in a great market that you think can grow. Like there needs to be a great team, but they also need to be able to win on the go-to-market side. So a lot of non-marketers overlook that. But even as a marketer, like you need to make sure that the company is going to care about marketing, that there's an easy way to accelerate marketing. We call these marketing advantages now. I didn't call them that then, but whether there's like a network effect or a really interesting story to tell, or just like a lot of like, room to just like really crush it on SEO or partnerships or channel or whatever it is. I promise that's the only time I'll say crush it on this podcast. I apologize. So, I was always like looking for, well, like, can they win on marketing too? And can I help them win? Like, it's not like, do they have a leg up here? And so, and also like my first startup, like I just liked music. So I worked at Ticketfly. I wanted to go to a lot of concerts. I went to a lot of concerts and that's what I wanted to do. And they ended up getting acquired by Pandora and then later spun out of Pandora and acquired by Eventbrite. So they did pretty well too. And so that was just kind of like, oh, I thought this was fun and I wanted to work on something that was close to my heart. And then I think I quickly learned after that like maybe some of the things that you love doing as hobbies, it doesn't need to be like your job too. And so that's when I went like total B2B and went to Asana. But Asana, I saw early traction. I saw that it was a great product and I saw it was a team who knew how to win across the board. And I had a really great mentor there who was the COO. We didn't have titles, but in theory was the COO. And had led marketing before. So he wasn't in the role of marketing, but he was managing me and had like tons of advice and mentorship. So I just felt like I was set up for success and the company was set up for success on the go-to-market side as well. So, and then joining Carta, they have a network effect that's pretty incredible. So I knew if you throw fuel on that fire, you could grow even faster. And so, those are some of the things I look for. But I think for marketers, like joining companies, I think, again, like a lot of these things I can look back in hindsight and say, but people are like, I just want to love the product. And I'm like, again, if you're not necessarily going to be in the target audience, but talk to people or relate to people who are in the target audience. And like, if you wouldn't use it, then don't do it. But it doesn't necessarily need to be something that you love, because the thing that's even more important than that is like, are you going to work well with this team? Are you going to work well with this founder? Do you want these founders to win? Do you feel like they're going to value marketing? Because so often companies don't value marketing and you're just set up to fail. And then additionally, like, can they win? And so like, you got to be thinking like an investor when you're picking startups, because you're giving this all of your time. Time is money. I won't say that again either, but you're investing all of your time, which if you wouldn't invest in the company with your money, you shouldn't invest all your time there. And I know that that's easier said than done, especially now where it's like hard to find marketing roles. And so maybe you can't do that every time, but as you accelerate in your career and have more optionality and when timing's a little bit better, it's important to say, like, is this something that can win? Because that's what propels your career.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, especially in startups. Like you're getting a bit of equity, so
That's
you
what I
kind
mean,
of
yeah.
are picking it like you are an investor. And yeah, like picking companies and where to invest your time and even like some of your money and fund capital. I want to ask you about that. Like your work at some of the companies has been super influential, but specifically I want to talk about like the crucial work that you did in exposing significant gaps in gender compensation and equity at Carta.
Yep.
You co-authored a study that garnered attention from a bunch of media outlets like Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Forbes. The investigation uncovered that Carta, alongside numerous other companies, was significantly allocating less equity to women. And a few years ago, by taking a stand and filing a lawsuit against Carta for gender discrimination and wrongful termination, you demonstrated remarkable bravery. I remember reading your post on Medium in the midst of that, what must have been a crazy, challenging time. But you were faced with all of this stuff and you showed a bunch of resilience and determination, and it really shone through. And your efforts not only brought these substantial inequities to light, but they also inspired within Carta a bunch of employees and other companies as well to demand change and break that bro culture. The only time I'm going to say bro on the podcast.
I know, right? We're like,
Uh,
oh, we just said that, didn't we? But yeah, it works in this context. It's better than me
Yeah.
saying crushing it, quite honestly. I'm still having regrets about that. What else? I said something else that was terrible. Oh, time is money. That was kind of sarcastic.
Yeah, I
you
used
know?
the script, so I can remove the
Oh, you don't
crushing
need to
remark
remove
if
it.
you
It's
want
funny
to.
for me to say it and then be like, oh no, I don't mind. I'm a pretty candid and honest person and just laugh at myself
But
all the time.
yeah, I
Um,
would love to ask you, like, how are you advancing your commitment to gender equity and inclusion in your current role at Market One, and maybe through some of your investment choices? Would love for you to unpack that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me speak to the go forward aspect more than the look back aspect, which I
Yeah.
could say less about. So uh we very actively try to make sure that we're getting with our fund, we're getting deal flow from multiple places, that we're thinking about the composition of our fund. We want to pick the best companies that can be successful, but we think that um, women and people of color and underrepresented minorities in general can often do a better job of that than your average co-founder. And so I think we are just actively trying to make sure there's balance in our portfolio. We've done a pretty good job of that. I don't actually have the latest numbers, but for a long time we were 50-50 across gender roles, which is just, yeah, that's great. And also with the people that invested in our fund. So if you're not familiar with VC investing, great. It's a weird world. I'm not recommending that everybody know all the details about it, but venture capitalist VCs have limited partners who invest in their fund, and then you're basically investing their money. And so you don't often know about these like limited partners, but our limited partners are a mix of people, but we have a ton of marketers who are investors in our fund. And we also really tried to make sure that we had the balance there. And so among our investors, we have, majority women, non-binary. So, it's hard to measure all these things. It's hard to be perfect. But we just make a conscious effort to do it without having like a stated sort of, mission of diversity. We're just a fund trying to have the people that invest in our fund and the companies that we invest in look more like, the people using those products. And so that's just kind of in our DNA. And it's also like why I do work with Empower Work, which is just a text line for people facing trouble in the workplace. And it mostly targets people that are lower income, although anyone can use it. So it's just me trying to like make sure I'm helping people in the workplace. I recognize that in my situation of filing a lawsuit, I was definitely in a place of privilege to even have the ability to file a lawsuit. I know that's a weird thing to say. Like I had the privilege of filing a lawsuit, and I don't necessarily think of it like I'm not like, wow, I was so lucky, but like a lot of people are in terrible situations and they don't have that ability and they don't have the opportunity because it does take time and money. And so, just trying to be as helpful like as I can to people that are in challenging situations at work. And I've talked to many people over the years that are in tough situations at work and just try to be available for that. Yeah, I think that's if everyone took that approach, we'd be in a better place rather than necessarily having like very strict stated minimums and things like that, like which are harder to adhere to. So that's a topic for a really long podcast, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, really appreciate you unpacking that. We had Chrissy Saunders on the show a couple weeks ago, and
She's an investor in our fund. Yeah.
yeah,
She's
yeah,
great.
she spoke very highly about the work that you're doing there. So yeah, thanks for unpacking that, and thanks for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Switching gears a little bit, I was listening to your episode on anchored intelligence, and you were talking about different GTM motions. And one point that really stood out to me from that, if you remember or not, is just like talking with his company about, the low-hanging fruits of investing in Martech and using booking tools like Chili Piper and so on. What we've noticed is Martech is hard. There's so many tools out there, and we often get caught up in this like shiny object syndrome. Like, imagine what we could do. There's so many cool things that we can deploy. What advice do you have for marketers understanding like the delta between their GTM motion, so understanding what motion they have, and then understanding what tech to put in place, like not just putting everything in place, but like being very strategic about what they put in place.
Yeah, for sure. So, as an investor as well as a marketer, I guess my job is to like figure out what's shiny objects syndrome and like what's the next big thing. So, that's like a daily challenge for me, right? Like as an investor. But I think you can obviously have that when you're choosing tools as well. And I think like you need to like there's two goals I think in choosing tools. Well, there's many, but the two most important things are that you want to make your experience for prospects, especially as it relates to like go-to-market motions, you want to make that as frictionless and amazing as you can. And so if you're going to use a tool that's maybe going to make the experience worse for prospects and customers, it probably doesn't make sense. Like even for instance, like if it's going to make you write shittier, can I say shittier on this podcast? I don't know. I'm just joking. If it's gonna make your content shittier, like maybe don't, because you want to add value and create quality things. So there's like this balance of like what's it gonna do for the actual like end user experience, and I think that's always really important. And then on your side, it's like, is it gonna make me more efficient? And is it going to fit into a workflow that I either already have or know I really need to add? So I'm not just using it to use it, or like using it and then change. Like if you don't have a personalization strategy and you don't know how personalization is going to help, or like even if you really only have like a really narrow ICP, like maybe personalization, even though it's a hot thing right now to personalize every content or personalize your homepage. And I'm a big fan of like Mutiny and tools like that and an investor in Mutiny. So I'm like a big proponent of that. But if that doesn't naturally fit into your strategy, like you don't need to use that tool. So I think it's like, what's my market? All things should start with what's the marketing strategy that fits best with my go-to-market motion, with my audience, with our product, our business overall. And then what tools are going to make it more efficient for the marketing team, or help you be more effective as a marketing team with hopefully enhancing the experience for our prospects and customers. So that is hard to always adhere by and know if you're doing the right thing, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of an art and a science to that. We'll link out in the show notes. You have a badass like a tool suggestion thread on LinkedIn, where there's like these like newish skills and concepts that you said marketers need to master, and one of them was like leverage modern Martech. And you asked a bunch of people on LinkedIn like, what are cool new like AI tools that you're playing with, and some of that led to like you doing like an AI showcase, which I was an attendee at, and
we're doing another
cool
one too, so that's fun. Yeah, I mean, look, like we, as an investor and marketer, like the center of my Venn diagram is Martech tools, right? Like I see tons of them. We invest across all of B2B, but like we see a ton of go-to-market tools. And so, and any investor right now, well, most investors are seeing everything AI. So I see a ton of this. And so, I've realized that one of the areas I can add the most value to marketers and founders is like, what go-to-market tools can you be using? So I've been doing a lot more over the past, like 6 months on LinkedIn and even in my newsletter, maybe longer than that, but just about what tools can you use and trying to like bring exposure to some of these things, and trying to recommend things I would actually use. And so we like have sponsors on certain things that we do and stuff like that, but we're always holding this bar of like, we need to know someone that's used it. We need to have an actual recommendation and we need to recommend it. So we're trying to do this in a very like authentic way, which maybe sounds like I'm like blowing smoke in your face, but it's true. Like I won't ever recommend something that I wouldn't use. And so trying to do that from this like unique perspective of where we sit at the center of this Venn diagram. So hopefully it's useful and it is fun. I mean, at a certain point when on LinkedIn, it is fun now. Like just the other day, I was like, need a B2B TikTok contractor and got like 80 suggestions. So it's helpful to me because like I really did have a company I work with that wanted to experiment there, but also like helpful to everyone that's following these things to just see all of the suggestions. So it's fun to be able to do that at this point with LinkedIn and even my newsletter to get all of these suggestions and hope it's helpful for other people. It's helpful for me. So
I've heard you say on another podcast that marketing isn't actually that hard. It can be pretty easy because, I mean, as marketers, I think a lot of us really enjoy what we do. I don't mean that marketing isn't hard. It takes skill set. Like there's a lot of expertise that goes into it. But I think once you get good at marketing and you get into a flow of it, it's a really enjoyable thing to do. I think that there's a lot of folks who look at the marketing team as like the arts and crafts department a little bit. The flip side of what you said that I thought was really interesting, and I felt this totally in my soul, was that the hard part of being a marketer is explaining marketing to folks within your organization,
Yeah.
explaining the value of it. How can marketers be better advocates for themselves within an organization?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, so in a lot of ways the internal marketing is harder than the external marketing, as you said. And it's funny, like I talk to tons of marketing leaders at all stages. And also have a bunch of friends that are now marketing leaders that I used to work with. And well, let me just give like a quick anecdote here. I was actually out last night with some people that used to be on my team at Asana, and they've all gone on to be, leading marketing teams themselves or leading huge parts of marketing at big companies. And I promise we don't like go out and talk about my newsletters on the regular, but they were like, that internal marketing newsletter really hit hard. And I was like, of all the newsletters, like that's the one that like hit the hardest, like, or like was the most valuable. And they're like, yeah, it's just like, I never realized how hard it was. And so it's funny, like that I would, I think I would have thought when I stepped out of in-house roles and into roles of just working with so many companies that like the harder things would be more tactical. Like, how do I do positioning and messaging? Or how do I set up full funnel analytics? And those things are hard and you need to explain those. But like some of these sort of almost softer skill topics are the topics that just constantly come up. How do I get buy-in on this? Or even like one that comes up a lot is like, my company doesn't want our website on a CMS and I really need it as a marketer. How do I deal with that? Like that comes up all the time. Or like my founder doesn't understand, or I'm getting so many requests from sales. So like these things are things that come up just all the time. And so I think when you're in those roles, you don't realize that like everyone is facing that problem, but everyone is facing that problem. And so again, like it's something that I've just started writing more about and putting more out about because it's just something that's universally faced but not universally talked about, I think. And so really trying to like shed a light on some tips for doing that. And like honestly, like I don't think that I'm the best person in the world doing that. And like honestly, I've gotten a lot better over time of working with so many founders on how to do that. Is the most valuable is just like letting people know that everyone's going through this and like talk to other marketers about how to do it. It's like I'm trying to kind of shed a light on this. And so how can you better advocate for marketing? Like you have to realize that most people in your company like really don't understand marketing. Like they pretend they do, but they have like an idea of what marketing is, or they pigeonhole marketing into one area when in fact marketing is much broader. And so everyone might act like a marketer, but they actually don't understand all the things you're talking about. And I know this because I talk to founders all the time and they're like, I don't really understand how this works. They're not going to tell you as a marketer that, but they tell me that. Or I hear them and I understand that they don't know how it works when they're talking about hiring. And I don't blame them. I don't know how, I'm not a full stack engineer here. And so they need to be educated on a more basic level than you think. They need to, like, you can't just go into like, I need a product marketer, because they think they know what a product marketer is. They probably don't. And so like going up a level in your communication, I think is really helpful. And like figuring out like what altitude is going to be best or what level to speak at for other leaders on your team is like really valuable. So it's the same process that you use for external marketing used internally. Like know your audience, speak to your audience specifically. For different audiences, you might have to say different things. Like know where in the funnel they are. Like where in the funnel of marketing understanding are they? So figuring all these things out. And it's just so funny, like marketers should be the best at this of any team in the company, but they're not. And so take the same things that you do externally and do them internally, and cut the jargon. And like jargon includes job titles, just to be clear. Like you're going to use this, but like nobody has the same definition. And so stop just assuming that everybody agrees. And so, yeah, cut the jargon, and job titles are jargon. So.
Yeah, so many great takeaways in that answer, Emily. I'm definitely resonated with that newsletter also. I'm very familiar with the founder or executive who's maybe watched a few Mad Men episodes and thinks that they're an expert on advertising now. But I love that your newsletter has tips for marketers that are subscribers, but there's also a bunch of insights for businesses and founders that are like building startups, right? And you mentioned that one of the most common questions that you get on like interviews and chats with clients and companies you're investing in is, who should be the first marketer that I hire? What is that marketer? Who should be the first? And you said that you most recommend
Yeah, I
over
just
like the
made it up.
T-shaped model. I love it. But you say that like the one you recommend the most is a marketer that has both growth marketing chops and product marketing chops.
Yeah.
And growth marketing has a very bad rep as a term in our industry. Too many still refer to it as only paid acquisitions, or worse, this idea of growth hacking. And we've kind of put that term to rest with Notion's head of growth marketing, Josh Kim, in a previous episode. But I'm a huge fan of how you've broken that down in another one of your newsletters. Growth marketing is 4 sub teams. You have demand gen, inbound, lifecycle, and marketing operations.
Mhm.
Does that mean, so if you say that like the pie shaped marketer is a product marketer and a growth marketer, and you say that the growth marketer is demand gen, inbound, lifecycle, and ops, does this pie shaped marketer have experience on all 4 sub teams in growth, or
Mhm.
just one of them? Like, just curious your take there.
Yeah, this is something that like I need my diagrams. It's hard to talk about this stuff out loud. I'm like
Yeah.
drawing it in my mind. So to back up a little bit, the pie shape thing, you mentioned that it's like instead of a T-shaped marketer, I'm talking like 3.14 pi, and I'm talking like the symbol. So there's 2 vertical lines and there's a line up top. It's that kind of pie. And so what I think is that I think that marketers need to spike. If you divide marketing up into like 3 main sub functions, growth marketing, as you just defined it, product marketing, and like brand and content. And all the other stuff that you don't really know. Brand and content. We don't have a good name for that one yet. But actually, we don't have good names for any of these things. But that's again, that's an hour-long discussion. But I want someone that is really strong in one area, pretty strong in another, and has working knowledge across all of the things to be your first marketer or to be your marketing leader at any stage. So it's kind of like a generalist with a specialist who's a specialist in one area and like pretty good at the other. As like time has gone by, I've started using this metaphor called fuel and engine, which is just in marketing. You need fuel, which is content for your audience, and you need an engine, which is the things you're doing on the growth side, the channels, all of that stuff. And they need to fit together and they need to match with your audience. And so I could adapt the pie shape thing to saying like, you need to understand how fuel and engine work together and then be, great at one side. That's another way of thinking about it, just to add more frameworks to your mind and more like shapes for you to think about. But the point here is that you need to understand how to set strategy across all of marketing. And so whether it be on the growth side, if you have that skill set, it's very hard to find someone who's equally proficient in outbound related things or demand gen related things. That's how I define demand gen, as driving demand specifically in sort of more of a sales-led motion. Again, this is my definition. Everybody's definition is different. And then sort of the inbound focus, which includes SEO and web and lifecycle and marketing ops, analytics, tech. It's really hard to find someone who's great at all of those things in an equal amount. But the thing here is, depending on your go-to-market motion, like if you have a hybrid motion, it's great to be good at both, like sort of the more demand gen sales, handoff to sales type things versus the inbound stuff. But like if you get what I'm saying, if you have a hybrid motion, you need that. But if you don't have a hybrid motion and you're just one or the other, you want someone that understands that motion really well. But the point here is that like you need to be able to set the strategy, but you don't need to be able to do everything yourself. So you need to know who are the contractors you need to hire. You need to know what's a great contractor or full-time hire look like in that role. But like you don't need that person to be able to do it all themselves. You need them to be scrappy enough that if they had to, they could probably figure it out. But like trying to find someone who's great at all of these things is impossible. So it's really about being able to have that layer of like, I can hire and set some strategy and know what great looks like. And maybe I can jump in and do it myself, but it's not my core skill set.
Something I've heard you talk about and that you've written about as well is like marketing as a product and having marketing manage like a product team. Like this really resonates with me. Like you're talking about like marketers wanting to have their website on a CMS. Like you need engineers and designers, writers, operations, project managers, like a whole multidisciplinary function to bring what is on the surface looks like a really simple message, right? A homepage or whatever. Why do you think this is so beneficial for marketing in this context? And like, what is the nirvana point for marketers in this scenario?
The nirvana point. I like that phrasing. So there's two, when I say like marketing is more like product, or marketing should be thought of like a product team, there's 2 points here that are kind of like wrapped up in this. The first point is that people, including marketers, often think that marketing is like building a marketing team or running a marketing team is like running a sales team, or that marketing is a service organization to sales. I think that's the wrong approach. I think sales is more singularly focused on like a specific area of the funnel and like hitting their quotas and like all of that stuff. And like, it's just a different thing. And I think that tension between what marketing does, which is more full funnel and like more holistic and one-to-many communication and multidisciplinary, like that's a good tension between the two teams that helps drive, revenue. But to think that you're just building a marketing team like a sales team really sets up recruiters, marketers, founders, everyone for failure, because it's not just like that. It's not an easy, and finance as well. It's not like an easy math formula to figure out how many people you need in marketing like it is for sales. In sales, there's usually like a few role archetypes like SDR, BDR, AE, sales manager, head of sales. Marketing is way more complicated. There's like a million roles. And so it's much closer actually to a product team. And by product, I mean like engineering product design, like you could call that the EPD org or whatever it is. And so, marketing is multidisciplinary. They're thinking about both short and long-term revenue. They're thinking about their goals need to be set that are kind of like, here are the big projects or the big bets I'm taking, much like you'd have big feature launches on the product side. But also there's things I'm doing to drive revenue right now, which on the product team, the equivalent there is like, I'm trying to get this number of active users with this amount of engagement all the time. And so the goal setting structure, the number of roles, even the skill sets of sort of that, like creative design, brand aspect alongside the sort of more technical components, that fuel and engine mix, it's just more similar. And so once you start thinking like that, I think it just makes it way more easy to understand how this org is going to shape up and how headcount planning should work and all of this stuff. So it's sort of an unlock when you explain it this way or I found like just in explaining this way to founders, recruiters, finance, et cetera, that it's just like, it's actually a lot more like building a product org. So stop trying to think of it like building a sales org and you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. And then the other point of this marketing's more like product is that marketing is actually building another product. The marketing is a product, like, and you can break that down and be like, your website's a product and your content's a product and every individual piece of content is like a feature. But if you think about it that way of like, what am I going to put my bets on? Like, what are the things that we're going to keep going? Like the features we're going to keep doubling down on? What are the new features that we need to build? Like, you're going to think about marketing in a better way, which is like, what's the core work I need to do to kind of keep the lights on? What are the big spikes and the big inflection points that we're planning for, rather than just like throwing everything into this product and just having a mess of features? Like, what's the strategy here? So I think it like just, I wish I had thought to frame it like that when I was at companies, because I think it would have helped me think about what I was doing better and how to explain it better. And so yeah, that's one, like fuel and engine, marketing's more like product. These are things that when I explain them to people are just like light bulb moments, and understanding how to, build marketing.
Yeah, I think it's a really...
The Nirvana point really quickly is getting everyone to understand that and then being able to do your thing, right? Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, I interrupted you.
We're just interrupting each other,
Oh, it's great. It's a flow state. I love the point. I hadn't thought of it this way, but the flow point, or the point that you made around hiring for marketing, like it's not a math formula. I know in my past life, I've been asked like, what would you do if you had this many more headcount? And you're like, yeah, but I need an engineer on my team. I need analytics. Like these people are not going to just add revenue like adding a salesperson. Like I know that sometimes there's like this formula, like salesperson will add this much, revenue per year. So explaining that internally, I think is quite the use a cliche, nut to crack. And I guess I just dived a little deeper into that point. Like, how do we as marketers and when we're building out our teams, like this product focus, how do we kind of evaluate the team members that we need? Like, how do you take a look at the current landscape and think like, hey, I'm going to need this long term. I'm going to need a product marketer. I'm going to need an engineer or something like that.
Two things. One thing, and I'll dive deeper on this, is you've got to do planning and goal setting before you do headcount planning, like the marketing work planning and goal planning. And then the second being back to the fuel and engine metaphor. So let me talk about the like goal setting. A lot of companies are like, we're not at the stage where we need to set goals yet, or the rest of my company doesn't do OKRs, so why should marketing? I don't care if it's an OKR system or something else, or just like goals or big rocks or whatever it is, just a system. In marketing, there's infinite things to do. much like a product team would have a hard time operating without a product strategy and a vision for what the product is going to be and a roadmap. I mean, some do, but it's like usually in people's minds. Like you have to have that stuff for marketing. So it's back to that same analogy. And you have to have a plan not only for like, what are my KPIs? Like your only goal in marketing can't be like a pipeline KPI or an MQL KPI or whatever it is, sign up KPI. It has to be, you need to also have goals for the big projects and the big initiatives and the big bets that you're making and the tests that you're doing. And when you plan that out, I think it's helpful to also say, here are the things we would love to prioritize and love to do, kind of our non-goals or our goals on hold. And like, what would it take to be able to do that in terms of hiring? So I like to make my hiring plan that way. It's like, what's possible with the team that I have? What are my non-goals or my future goals that I can't get to right now? And this works for a lot of reasons. One, it works for headcount planning. And two, it helps say to other teams, we really want to do this stuff that you're requesting, but we can't do that unless we have another marketing ops person to set the foundation and all of that, or another writer or another designer to support everyone. And then the other thing I think about is back to the fuel and engine analogy. If you add another layer into that, it's like there's really like fuel, engine, and foundation. So foundation's like, and there's overlap in all these things. This isn't perfect, but there are, the fuel is like all the things you're creating, all the content you're creating, as I mentioned. And so there's roles related to fuel, and there's roles related to engine, like demand gen manager, or growth marketing manager, or, lifecycle marketer. And then there's foundational stuff that's more around like some of the product marketing research, and you could put marketing ops in there. You could also put marketing ops in engine, but you're really trying to balance all these things. And so I usually actually like kind of not really go back and forth between fuel and engine people, but kind of like, it's like, I'm going to hire a fuel person. I'm probably going to need another engine person. And like, part of, at some point I got to like check on my foundation, and is there a hire I need there that will enable me to do things? And maybe you could think about it as there's like a fuel foundation and an engine foundation. And those, I think people think like sales, like you just keep adding a demand gen person, or you keep adding like an SEO person or a paid person, or you keep adding a product marketer or a content marketer, and like output is going to be, kind of easy to formulate. But again, you got to go back and think about that foundational stuff. So I think balancing fuel and engine is a good way to think about it. It just like naturally kind of works for that too. The other thing I'll say about hiring or headcount planning in general is like, your plans in marketing headcount, much like in the product side, are made to be broken. It's not like sales again. People that you hire, like they're different. There's a lot of talk about shapes today, but as you can tell, I'm a pretty visual thinker. So like people's, shape of their skill set, like I like to say it's pie shape, but it's actually very amorphous. And so you might hire someone that like spikes in different areas, like it fulfills the role, but they look different. And so it's a puzzle that's changing with every piece you put into it on the marketing side. And so you need to allow for that flexibility. So it's not as simple, again, it's like, I'm going to hire 10 AEs and get what I need. And so you need to set that expectation from the start, whether you're leading all of marketing or you're leading growth marketing or you're leading marketing ops, that like, this is going to change. Like the number might stay the same, but like, and maybe it doesn't, because maybe you hire someone who just like makes everything so much better and you don't need that other person. So I think like you need to make it as flexible enough for it to change. And some of my best advice as you scale is to not put very specific roles for those things. Like if you can get away with it, just be like fuel marketer, engine marketer, because it's going to change. And quite honestly, other people in the company don't care what all those different roles mean. I think it's easier to do it that way.
Love the analogies you're coming through here.
Well, first of all, I have a newsletter, and every newsletter kind of has like a framework. So I'm not coming up with these on the fly here, but I think in diagrams. So something that's interesting is like I make my people find interesting. I don't know if it's interesting. It's just the way my brain works, but I make diagrams before I write newsletters. So there's a draft of like almost every diagram before I do the writing.
Very cool.
Yeah, because I'm not a writer. Like at all. I am now, I guess, but I don't think of myself as a writer, and I have to start with something. So I like make frameworks and visuals, and then I like put the words around it.
Yeah, no, the analogies are definitely helping us. Like we turn every audio episode into a GPT powered blog post with takeaways and summaries, and we got Midjourney header images there. So like the fuel and the engine is just going to be so easy for me. But I love like it's easy to grasp in a sense. Like I'm picturing what you just said, like demand gen, inbound, paid content. on the fuel side. Like it
Yeah.
is part of the product of what is marketing.
Yeah.
But just like a product team building features and like the UI that's very
Mhm.
front facing for people, there are back-end engineers and
Yep.
people that are working on the engine part. And
Yep.
that's like the frameworks and product
Yep.
marketing and go to market and the marketing
Yep.
operations team and analytics. So yeah, love that. I also love the point where you said your headcount plans are made to be broken
Yeah.
because hell, like we're in a startup and shit changes fast. Like it's good work to do it and like roadmap it and see kind of a vision in the sand, but it's made to be broken.
It's made to be broken, but also that, yeah, again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't make it because it does help you. Your headcount planning needs to be aligned with the activities. And I see too many people do this in isolation. So it's like, oh, we want to do this like huge web project or like finally get our website on our CMS, to pick the thing I always like to talk about, and drive home. It's like, well, we can't do that if we don't have someone that like owns and manages the website. Like, who's going to project manage that? And so we got to make a hire before we can do that. And so you need to do those things in tandem.
So, something you've mentioned a few times, and I want to pull it out because I've heard you talk about it on another podcast, and I want to ask my own version of this question, is around big bets. So,
Yeah.
like, as a marketer, like, I live and dream about placing these big bets, you know, starting newsletters, starting a podcast, building micro apps. But there's an element of gutsiness, I think, that comes with this, of sticking it out to see how long it can work.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your advice for marketers who want to place these big bets, just want to sell it internally? And then how long do you stay attached to your idea before, you know, you call it a win or call it a loss?
Yeah, so I guess I'm really into this product org analogy today, so I'm just going to keep it going.
Yeah.
Which is that I think figuring out the next big thing to do is partially based on like overall vision. It's partially based on what people are sort of demanding or where your audience is. It's partially based on, you know, requests from other people. It's like a combination of all of these things. So I think it's definitely a hard thing to figure out what are those bets and how do I do it. But the great way what products team often do is they like test features. They make MVPs. They make, you know, little versions of them. And so before, you know, like especially maybe like a couple years ago now or even a year ago, people were like, I need to have a community. And I'm like, before you launch the community that's always on, do some events. Do people come? Do people care? Do they want to talk to each other? Do they want to be in a community? Like, do some events. And then like from your events, you know, then see if you can take that same audience and like get them talking to just each other and like a round robin one-on-one thing. Like what baby step your way into these things. So the big bet is only usually made after some little bets. And so that's why I advocate for thinking in terms of like tests and experiments. So I like to say that you should have like 4 types of goals in marketing, which is another framework. Tests and experiments, project goals, KPI goals, which are the ones usually people usually have, the numbers. And then also some ops goals around hiring and things you need to put in place. And so they usually start as tests. Like, I have this thing I want to try, and if that's successful, you go from there. And if the big bet doesn't work, but the test worked, it's like there was something here. Why isn't this scaling? Is it that I didn't do it right? I didn't go in the right direction, or I didn't put enough effort into it? And some of that's art and some of it's science. And I don't know that there's a good rule of thumb other than saying like, well, the test worked. So let's go back to that point and say like, what happened here? The other thing I want to say on this topic is that one of my least favorite things that's said at startups is, oh, we tried that before and it didn't work, so why would we try it again?
Classic.
Your audience is constantly changing, or I tried that at my other startup and that didn't work. That's the worst. Your audience is always changing, or it's not the same from company to company. The channels that work and how channels work are always changing. Like algorithms are always changing. Like, you know, and it's more obvious to understand why on like search or LinkedIn, but like everywhere, things are always changing. How channels work is changing. What have I said so far? Audience is always changing. Channels are always changing. Your ability to put the same amount of effort into it's changing. Like the time and what competitors are doing is changing, and your team composition is changing. So just because you did it before and it didn't work, like there's obviously learnings, and take the learnings and like see what has anything changed from when we did this before. What would be different? And if it's like nothing, then maybe don't do it. But to just think that it didn't work before, so it's not going to work now, or it did work before, so it's going to work now, is false. And it's especially false when you weren't even at the same damn company. So
The
keep
Martech
that in
version of
mind.
that is I use that tool at my other company, so it's the best tool. We need to use that tool at this company
I
too.
mean, it's been like 5 years. Like, yeah, like in some cases, it's like it's been 5 years since I was there, but it worked really well. And it's like, well, yeah. So things are ever changing, especially now in marketing. Things are changing like faster than ever because of the like explosion of tools and because of AI's impact on marketing. So yeah, things are changing all the time. So don't let that be a decision. But do know, like, if everyone around you is like, I really just don't think this is gonna work. Like, take it to heart. But like, I sometimes think if you have conviction and you know that there's things you can do differently, like you got to take those big bets. So unless you have another
Yeah.
big bet that's better, like keep on keeping on, right? So I think it also comes down to that. So again, like some of this stuff I can like framework it all out, but at the end of the day, like there's just a lot of going with your gut and your experience and
Yeah.
what feels like it could be a hit. Um, and so yeah, some of it I can't. There's some things I can't like put a framework on.
Such a great answer, Emily. We're getting close on time. We got two last questions for you. I'd be
Cool.
remiss if I didn't ask this question. Selfishly, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are curious about this too. Like you talked about first rounds angel track as this catalyst for helping you navigate the transformation from marketer to angel investor to now fund manager. For listeners and myself who want to dabble in angel investing and are thinking of that first step, what advice do you have? And I've heard you share that like you don't need as much money to like invest in some companies as like maybe some folks are thinking. So curious for you to unpack that.
Yeah. So I mean, again, a lot has changed since I did angel track and got into angel investing, primarily just that it's harder to raise money and the bar is different. Like I started angel investing in like actively, not, just occasionally, in like 2019, 2020. So we were still in like really high valuation
Hmm.
land. And so it was easier to raise and people were raising bigger rounds. So they were raising more from angels. So it might've been easier to find it's weird. It's like in some ways it's harder to raise money now, but it's also harder for angels, I think, now to get in on companies. It's like some weird
Hmm.
thing where I feel like there's just tighter rounds with fewer people involved, and it's maybe harder to get exposure to a lot of these opportunities. I don't know. The time, all that's to say, I am probably saying too much about that. Times have changed, and so maybe my journey isn't exactly the journey that you would have, but I think there's two things here. There are many opportunities to invest smaller amounts. It used to be, this was the point I was trying to make. You can maybe edit some of this out, but the syndicate world of being able to like go on AngelList and find a bunch of deals to invest in that are great deals alongside others at really small check sizes, that has gone down over the past couple of years. It kind of spiked maybe in like 2019-ish and then 2020-ish, and then it's pulled way back. And so there's maybe fewer of those opportunities, but there's still opportunities to invest in startups at small amounts if you are basically going to function like an advisor on a certain area. And that doesn't mean you need to be an advisor on all things marketing. It could be like, I'm a subject matter expert on this space and I'm also a marketer. I really spike in I really spike on SEO, but like I'm going to be your go-to person on SEO until you hire an agency or a person. So I think like your value add can maybe be bigger than you think, even if you're a specialist more so than a generalist, because early stage companies or even growth stage companies aren't necessarily hiring specialists in every area. So your value can be a lot. And if you're going to bring a lot of value, like smaller check sizes are usually acceptable. So, if you're investing a small amount, you basically can be like, well, I'm going to help you a lot and get exposure and experience here and do it that way. And so I think to wrap this up, it's like there are still some syndicate opportunities to invest that way, but those are kind of on the decline a little bit. Maybe they'll come back up, or they've been on the decline. But if you're really excited about a space or you're really like love an audience or you have a lot of experience to give, you can often get exceptions made for smaller check sizes. And by that, I mean like 5 to 10K, 10K typically being like the minimum that companies will take, but there's always exceptions.
Cool. So last question, we ask it of all of our guests, and just, tons of gratitude for you spending an hour with us chatting about all these topics. It's been like a masterclass for us, but you're a founder, a newsletter writer, angel investor. You offer a home to rescue dogs, a live music aficionado who's been to over 1,000 concerts, which blows my mind. One question we ask all our guests is, how do you remain happy and successful in your career? How do you find balance between all the things you're working on while staying happy?
Yeah. I'm one of those annoying people who gets a lot of happiness from doing work because I actually really like what I do, and I think that shines through and like the passion that I have for it. And so I'm really, really lucky in the sense that I think I found a career that suits me really well. Like I am both pretty analytical and data driven and mathy, but I also love the creative side of things and like love design and like love like sitting in Figma myself. So I just found something that like really fits my skill set. So that's just like I found my path, and so I get a lot of happiness from that. I've had periods of time where, for a number of reasons, including like health reasons, where I haven't really been able to work, and I get so bored, and I'm just like not happy. I mean, I hope that everyone can find some semblance of that. I know that's like kind of an impossible hope for people, but for everyone, right? But like that's a big thing. So find the thing you love to do, and if you're a marketer and you don't love it, like you know, figure out a path out of that at some point, right? But I think also. I um I think people think I work all the time because I do a bunch of things, and maybe I do work a lot, but I'm also like pretty efficient at getting things done and try to focus on like again, like I try to have my own big bets and focus on those things and not do every little thing. And like I'm the first to say that I'm like terrible at email and responding to people and things like that, because like something's got to give, right? And so I'm not going to be great at all the things, but I try to be great at the things that matter, and I try to make time for the things I like doing. So like I love like being on the water and like being on boats, and so I've like figured out a way for that to happen in the summers of my life. And like I love going to concerts, and that's the thing like I like to do with my friends, and so I've always prioritized that. So I think the this is a long-winded answer. It's weird to talk about like what keeps you happy. And you ask this of everyone, and like I'm happy sometimes, I'm not happy all the time, let me tell you. But I think the thing here is that like I found something that I really like doing, and I've continued as I've gained success in my career to try to optimize my life more and more, so that I can do the things I like doing and don't do the things I don't like doing. And I think that's like, to me, that's what success looks like as your career gets better, is that you can choose the things you do. And so that's the path that I'm constantly on and optimizing for, is what do I want to be doing? And so I think everyone, no matter where they are in their career, can think about, well, what is that ideal and how can I get closer and closer to that with everything that I do?
Such a great answer, Emily. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you for making the time for us today and chatting about marketing. I know you love it, and it definitely shines through in your passion. And yeah, we'll share links to the Market One newsletter and everything you guys are cooking up there. Continue to be amazing at what you're doing. I'm a huge fan, and again, yeah, really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.